The rain hammered my windshield as I sat in the parking garage, staring at my phone screen. 23 missed calls. Just 2 days before, Richard Wells had looked me dead in the eye and told me I wasn't ready for promotion. Now, everyone at Pinnacle Systems was calling me like the building was on fire. My name is Michael Patterson. I'm 49, and until that conversation with my boss, I honestly thought I knew exactly where my career was going. Turns out I was wrong about a lot of things. I've been at Pinnacle Systems for 8 years. Before that, I spent 12 years in the Navy handling logistics operations. When you're responsible for getting supplies to ships halfway around the world, you learn pretty quick that details matter. Every system, every process, every backup plan, they all have to work perfectly, or people get hurt. That mindset served me well in corporate America, maybe too well. When I started at Pinnacle, the operations department was a complete disaster. My predecessor had left without a single piece of documentation, no handover notes, nothing. It was like walking into a house where someone had cut all the electrical wires and removed all the labels. I spent the first 6 months rebuilding everything from scratch, working until midnight most nights, coming in on weekends, mapping out every process, and creating detailed guides for absolutely everything. My son, Jake, was only 7 then. This was about 5 years after my wife Sarah passed from cancer, and I remember him asking why Daddy was always at work. But I thought it would pay off eventually. That's what they tell you, right? Work hard, keep your head down, and you'll get recognized. For 8 years, I was the guy who made sure everything ran smoothly. When our biggest client, Granite Industries, had urgent requests, I was the one who stayed late to handle them. When systems crashed, I fixed them. When processes broke down, I rebuilt them. I created training materials, documented every workflow, and basically became the institutional memory of the entire operations department. Richard Wells became my boss about 3 years ago. Nice enough guy, about 45, very focused on the big picture, strategic stuff. The problem was, he never bothered to learn any of the actual systems. Why would he? I had everything running so smoothly that he could focus entirely on executive meetings and planning. What I didn't know was that Richard had other plans for the department. His son, Austin, had just graduated with an MBA from Northwestern. 26 years old, smart kid, but he'd never worked a day in operations. Never handled a crisis at 2 a.m., never had to explain to an angry client why their shipment was delayed, never had to rebuild a system from nothing. The promotion meeting happened on a Tuesday. I'd prepared a comprehensive presentation showing how I'd improved efficiency by 35% and reduced errors by 60% over the past 2 years. I even highlighted the Granite Industries relationship, which I personally managed, that brought in $8 million annually. Richard flipped through my portfolio for maybe 5 minutes before setting it aside. "I appreciate everything you've done, Michael," he said, not really looking at me. "But I've been thinking about the direction of this department. We need fresh perspectives, new energy. Austin will be joining us next month as Senior Operations Manager." Senior Operations Manager. That was the position I'd been working toward for 8 years. "I see," I said. "And where does that leave me?" "You'll continue in your current role. Austin will need someone experienced to help him get up to speed." Someone experienced to help him get up to speed. Translation: I'd do all the work while his son got the title and the salary bump. I kept my expression neutral, the way they taught us in the Navy. "I understand. Thank you for the feedback." "Great. I'm glad we're on the same page. Austin starts Monday, so maybe you can prepare some orientation materials over the weekend." That's when something finally clicked for me. I'd been working weekends for 8 years. I'd missed Jake's baseball games, school plays, and parent-teacher conferences. I'd given this company everything, and they wanted me to spend my weekend preparing to train my replacement. I stood up, shook Richard's hand, and walked out of his office. But instead of going back to my desk, I walked straight to the parking garage. That's where I made the decision that changed everything. I wasn't going to quit in anger. I wasn't going to storm out or make a scene. I was going to do something much more effective. I was going to follow my job description exactly as written. See? Here's what Richard and the executives didn't understand. My official job description was pretty basic. Manage daily operations within assigned scope, coordinate with other departments as needed, maintain client relationships within operational parameters. Standard corporate language that didn't come close to describing what I actually did every day. What I actually did was arrive at 7 a.m. to prep briefing notes for Richard's 9 a.m. meetings. I answered emails for 3 different departments because somehow I'd become the go-to guy for any operational question. I solved problems before they became crises, staying late to make sure nothing exploded overnight. But my job description said 9 to 5, so that's what I was going to do. I drove home that Tuesday evening and did something I hadn't done in years. I turned off my work phone at 5:30 p.m. Jake was shocked when I walked in the door at 6 p.m. instead of 8 or 9. "Dad? Why are you home so early?" "I decided my time was more valuable than I thought," I told him. "Want to throw a baseball around before dinner?" His face lit up like Christmas morning. Wednesday morning, I arrived at exactly 9 a.m. No briefing notes for Richard, no getting ahead of the day's crises. I answered emails addressed directly to me and forwarded everything else to the appropriate departments. When my phone rang with questions about processes that weren't technically my responsibility, I politely directed callers to the relevant department heads. By lunch, people were starting to notice. Janet from accounting stopped by my desk with a confused expression. "Michael, did you see the email about the Granite Industries shipping schedule conflict?" "I did," I replied, continuing to work on my assigned quarterly report. "So, can you fix it like you usually do?" "That's actually a logistics coordination issue. I forwarded it to shipping and procurement. They'll need to work it out together." Her eyebrows went up. "But you always handle these cross-department things." "I've been advised to focus more on my core responsibilities," I said with a smile. "I'm just trying to be more efficient with my time." The look of confusion on Janet's face told me everything I needed to know. Nobody had ever bothered to understand what my actual job was supposed to be versus what I'd been doing all these years. By Thursday, the cracks were really starting to show. The Granite Industries issue had escalated because shipping and procurement couldn't figure out the workaround I'd normally handle in 10 minutes. 3 other clients had routine requests that were sitting unanswered in various departments because nobody knew the proper escalation procedures. I watched it all unfold with the detached interest of someone observing a science experiment. Every email that sat unanswered, every phone call that got transferred 3 times, every urgent request that nobody could handle, it was all documented in my comprehensive operations manual that apparently nobody had ever bothered to read. Peter from procurement wandered by my desk around 2 p.m., looking completely frazzled. "Michael, the Morrison Industries purchase order is stuck in approval hell. Can you work your magic?" "What seems to be the issue?" I asked, genuinely curious. "The system won't accept their new billing address, and nobody knows how to override it." I nodded thoughtfully. "That process is covered in Section 7 of the Operations Manual. The override requires supervisor approval from both procurement and accounting. But that'll take hours of phone calls and emails back and forth. It's a security feature to prevent billing fraud," I pointed out. "Pretty important protection for the company." Peter stared at me. "You've always just handled these things in 5 minutes." "I had special authorization from previous management to expedite certain processes," I clarified. "But with the department restructuring coming up, I thought it best to follow standard protocols." He walked away, shaking his head, probably wondering when I'd suddenly become such a stickler for the rules. Thursday evening, I was home by 5:15 p.m. Jake was working on homework at the kitchen table when I walked in. "Dad, can you help me with this math problem?" For the first time in months, I actually had the mental energy to sit down and focus on his algebra instead of thinking about work emergencies. We spent an hour working through problems together, and I realized how much I'd missed these simple moments. "You know, Dad," Jake said as we finished up, "you seem different this week." "Different how?" "Less stressed, I guess. Like you're actually here when you're here." Smart kid. He'd noticed something I was just starting to understand myself. Friday morning brought the real crisis. I arrived at 9 a.m. to find chaos in full swing. Richard was pacing outside the conference room, Austin was already there looking overwhelmed, and Byron Fisher, our regional director, had apparently been called in for an emergency meeting. The receptionist flagged me down before I could reach my desk. "Michael, they need you in conference room B immediately." I gathered my notebook and walked into what was clearly a full-scale crisis situation. Besides Richard, Austin, and Byron, there were two people I didn't recognize, probably executives from corporate headquarters. "Michael," Byron said with obvious relief, "thank God you're here. We've got a serious situation with Granite Industries." "What's the specific issue?" Richard launched into an explanation, but it was clear he only understood half the problem. Granite had called an emergency meeting for 10 a.m. because their entire implementation was failing. Austin was taking notes frantically, but kept asking basic questions that showed he had no understanding of our systems. "Their entire Q4 rollout is at risk," one of the corporate executives said grimly. "They're threatening to pull the contract if we can't resolve this today." I reviewed the issue details they'd gathered. It was actually a fairly straightforward problem if you understood the system dependencies and had access to the right documentation. "This is a known issue with their custom configuration," I said calmly. "The resolution is documented in the Implementation Guide, Section 12. It requires coordinating changes across 3 different systems in a specific sequence." Austin was frantically flipping through his copy of the manual. "Which section exactly?" "Section 12, subsection 4.7 through 4.12. The process takes about 3 hours if you follow the step-by-step procedures." Byron leaned forward. "Can you handle this immediately?" I checked my watch. "I have the quarterly compliance review scheduled at 11 a.m. That's due to federal regulators by end of day, so it can't be rescheduled." "The compliance review can wait," Richard said quickly, cutting me off. "Granite is more critical." "I understand Granite is important," I replied, maintaining a steady tone. "However, missing the regulatory deadline results in automatic penalties and potential license suspension. That would affect all our clients, not just Granite." The room went silent. You could practically hear everyone calculating the financial and legal implications. "What are our options?" Byron asked carefully. "Well, Austin could handle the Granite issue using the documented procedures. It would be excellent training for him, and I'd be available for questions between compliance review sessions." Austin looked like a deer in headlights. I don't think I'm ready for something this critical." "The documentation is very detailed," I said encouragingly. "Everything is laid out, step by step. This is exactly the kind of hands-on experience you'll need in your new role." Richard's face was getting red. "Michael, we need you to fix this personally." "I'm happy to take point on Granite," I said. "If you'd like me to reschedule the compliance review, but I want to be clear about the regulatory implications." Byron held up a hand. "Let's think this through. What would it take to handle both?" I considered the timeline. "The compliance review is scheduled in 2-hour blocks. I could handle the most critical Granite fixes between sessions, but the full resolution wouldn't be complete until after 5 p.m. "That's cutting it very close with Granite's deadline," the corporate executive noted. "It is," I agreed. "In the past, I would have stayed until midnight to handle both. But I've been reflecting on work-life balance lately. My son has a baseball game tonight that I've already missed twice this month. The silence was deafening. Byron finally broke the silence. Michael, let me be direct. What would it take for you to handle this crisis the way you always have? I looked around the room at the faces staring at me. These people had relied on my expertise for 8 years without ever acknowledging what I actually contributed. Now, suddenly, my work-life balance was their emergency. Well, I said slowly, I suppose we should discuss what my role actually is here. Your role is to solve operational problems, Richard said tersely. According to my job description, my role is to manage daily operations within assigned scope. The Granite implementation falls under project management, which reports to a different department. The corporate executive leaned forward. Are you saying you won't help? Not at all. I'm saying that if we want to resolve this properly, we need to clarify responsibilities and authorities. Austin is starting as Senior Operations Manager on Monday. This seems like an excellent opportunity for him to learn the systems. Austin spoke up, his voice shaky. Michael, I appreciate your confidence, but I'm not ready for something this high stakes. I turned to him with genuine kindness. Austin, you have an MBA from Northwestern. You're smart and capable. The only difference between you and me is that I've seen these problems before. But every expert was once a beginner. But what if I mess it up? Then we'll fix it. That's how you learn. The documentation is comprehensive, and I'll be available for guidance. Richard was getting impatient. We don't have time for training exercises. Actually, we do, I said. The Granite issue isn't going anywhere in the next few hours. It's been building for weeks because nobody wanted to follow the proper implementation procedures. A few more hours won't change anything. Byron studied me carefully. Michael, it seems like something has changed in your approach this week. You're right. I've been doing some thinking about my career trajectory and what I want my legacy to be. And what conclusion did you reach? That I've been enabling a system that doesn't work. By constantly stepping in to solve problems outside my official role, I've prevented the company from building proper processes and developing other people's capabilities. The room was quiet, except for the hum of the air conditioning. Let me ask you something, I continued. What happens when I retire, or get hit by a bus, or decide to take that job offer from Baxter Industries? The corporate executive's eyes sharpened. What job offer? A competitor reached out last month. Director of Operations, 35% salary increase, full remote flexibility. I haven't responded yet because I've been loyal to Pinnacle. I wasn't lying. Baxter had reached out, though I hadn't seriously considered their offer until this week. Byron and the corporate executive exchanged glances. Richard looked like he was going to be sick. Perhaps we should discuss this privately, Byron said. Austin, why don't you start reviewing the Granite documentation with Michael's guidance? Everyone else, let's step into my office. As Austin and I walked to my desk, he seemed overwhelmed. Michael, I want you to know I never asked my dad to give me this promotion. I know you deserved it. I stopped walking and looked at him. Austin, you seem like a good kid. But here's the thing. This isn't about what you asked for or what you deserve. It's about what's best for the company and what's best for you. What do you mean? If your father had promoted you over me without proper preparation, you would have failed. Not because you're incompetent, but because you're not ready. That failure would have damaged your confidence and your reputation for years. Austin nodded slowly. I hadn't thought about it that way. Leadership isn't about getting the title first and figuring it out later. It's about developing the competence to handle the responsibility. If you're serious about operations management, you need to learn these systems inside and out. We spent the next hour going through the Granite documentation. Austin was actually quite sharp. He asked good questions and grasped concepts quickly. With proper mentoring, he could become a solid operations manager in a couple of years. Around noon, Byron returned to my desk. "Michael, could I speak with you privately?" We walked to his office, where the corporate executive was waiting. I noticed Richard wasn't there. "Please sit down," Byron said. "I want to be completely transparent with you. We've made some serious mistakes in how we've managed this department." "What mistakes specifically?" The corporate executive spoke up. "We've created an unsustainable dependency on your expertise without appropriate recognition or compensation, and we've allowed personal relationships to influence professional decisions." I waited for them to continue. "We'd like to offer you the position of Director of Operations, reporting directly to me," Byron said. "35% salary increase, authority to restructure the department as you see fit, and full hiring authority for 2 additional senior positions." It was a good offer. Not as dramatic as the 75% increase I'd fantasized about, but realistic and fair. "What about Austin?" I asked. "Austin will start as an operations associate and work his way up under your guidance. If he demonstrates competence, he can advance based on merit." "And Richard?" Byron shifted uncomfortably. "Richard will be transitioning to a strategic planning role. The operational departments will report through your office." So Richard was being moved sideways. It wasn't revenge exactly, but it was accountability. "I need to consider this," I said. "Of course. But Michael, I need an answer by Monday morning, and I'd appreciate if you could help stabilize the Granite situation today, regardless of your decision." I nodded. "I'll handle Granite this afternoon. Austin can assist and take detailed notes." As I walked back to my desk, I thought about what had just happened. They were offering me everything I'd wanted: recognition, authority, appropriate compensation. But more importantly, they were finally acknowledging the value I'd been providing all along. The question was, did I want to stay and fix this system, or start fresh somewhere else? That afternoon, Austin and I worked together on the Granite Industries crisis. I walked him through each step of the resolution process, explaining not just what to do, but why each step mattered. He took detailed notes and asked smart questions that showed he was really trying to understand the underlying systems. "This is incredibly complex," Austin said as we finished the technical fixes. "How did you learn all this?" 8 years of trial and error," I told him. "Plus, a lot of late nights reading system manuals that nobody else wanted to touch. I had no idea how much went into this job. My dad made it sound like basic project coordination." I looked at him carefully. Austin seemed genuinely humbled by the experience. "Your dad's not wrong that it involves coordination, but operations is about understanding how all the pieces fit together and what happens when they don't." We wrapped up the Granite fixes by 4:30 p.m. Their system was running smoothly again, and Austin had a comprehensive set of notes for handling similar issues in the future. As I was packing up to leave at 5 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Jake. "Dad, game starts at 6:30. Will you really be there?" I looked at that text for a long moment. For 8 years, the honest answer would have been probably not. Tonight, the answer was different. "Wouldn't miss it," I texted back. Jake's baseball game was everything I'd been missing. He pitched 4 strong innings, and I got to see him strike out the cleanup hitter with a curveball I'd taught him last weekend. After the game, we went for ice cream and talked about school, his friends, and his plans for summer. "Dad," he said as we sat outside the ice cream shop, "are you going to keep coming to my games?" "That's the plan, buddy. I've been working too much, and I don't want to miss any more of your seasons." "Good," he said, grinning, "because Tommy's dad never misses his games, and I was getting jealous." That hit me harder than I expected. My 12-year-old son had been watching other fathers show up while his dad was stuck in meetings about quarterly reports. Over the weekend, I thought long and hard about Byron's offer. The director position was everything I'd worked toward: recognition, authority, and the ability to build systems that would help other people advance instead of getting stuck like I had. But there was also something appealing about the fresh start that Baxter Industries represented. No history of being overlooked, no colleagues who still saw me as the behind-the-scenes problem solver rather than leadership material. On Sunday evening, I made my decision. Monday morning, I arrived at 8:30 a.m., a compromise between my old 7 a.m. routine and the strict 9 a.m. I'd been maintaining. I went straight to Byron's office. "I'm accepting your offer," I told him, "but with two conditions." Byron nodded. "Go ahead. First, I want full authority to hire and develop talent from within the company. Too many good people get overlooked because they're not in the right positions to showcase their abilities." Agreed. Second, I want to implement a comprehensive cross-training program. What happened this week should never happen again. No critical knowledge should exist in only one person's head. Also agreed. Anything else? Just one thing. I want Austin to succeed in this field if it's what he really wants. But he needs to earn it through competence, not connections. Byron smiled. "I think you'll find Austin is more committed to learning than any of us expected." The transition took about 6 weeks. I restructured the department around clear roles and responsibilities instead of the informal system of whoever handles it best. I hired 2 excellent senior staff members who brought fresh perspectives while I provided the institutional knowledge they needed to be effective. Austin turned out to be a dedicated learner. He worked harder than anyone expected, staying late not because he had to, but because he wanted to master the systems. Within 3 months, he was handling routine client issues independently and showing real potential for leadership. The most surprising development was with Richard. Once he wasn't trying to manage operations he didn't understand, he actually excelled at strategic planning. His big-picture thinking, combined with the solid operational foundation we were building, helped the company land 2 major new contracts. 6 months later, I was working at a sustainable pace, home for dinner by 6:30 most nights, and present for every one of Jake's remaining games that season. My team was functioning independently, clients were happy, and I felt like I was finally doing the job I'd always been capable of. One evening, as Jake and I worked on homework together, he asked me about work. "So you're like, really important now?" he said, looking up from his algebra. "I was always important, Jake. It just took them a while to figure it out." "Is that why you were working so much before? To prove you were important?" Smart kid. "Yeah, I think so. But I learned something. The people who matter will see your value without you having to work yourself to death proving it. And the people who don't see it, well, sometimes you have to step back and let them figure out what they're missing." As I watched my son work through his math problems with the same methodical approach I'd tried to teach him, I realized that the best response to being undervalued isn't anger or revenge. It's demonstrating your worth so clearly that it becomes impossible to ignore. The promotion to director came with respect, authority, and the ability to build something better. But the real victory was simpler than that. I was finally being seen for what I'd always been capable of doing. And I was home for dinner every night to help my son with his homework. If you've ever felt invisible at work despite doing excellent work, remember this. Your value doesn't disappear just because others can't see it. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop making their blindness your problem and start making your worth impossible to ignore.